We have 5 different countries participating and 4 of them represented here. And we wanted to find out about different locations and how it was to implement the field trials in very different contexts. And then also the fact of having a country with a couple of different locations, that also helps us understand what it might be to scale up within a country. So that's part of what we're trying to find out about here. I wonder if we could talk about the design of the field trials, the training and the implementation of the tools.
The training that we conducted at country level, also in Italy, we had 2 field trials. So I will mainly refer to the one that we conducted in the Umbria region, in which we were involved. So the training was based in the curriculum that was developed at European level with the other partners, and we could easily adapt it to the context of our region, in which the validation system per se, apart from the transversal skill, is not fully mature yet. So we had to select and adapt the contents of the training, and we decided, together again with the regional agency for active labor market policies, to make value of the experiences and professionalism of the public employment services counselors. So we, apart from the more theoretical part, or more the parts that were based on, for instance, the competence framework developed by Transval-EU, etc., we invested a lot on organizing practical group work and laboratories with the participants, so to start from the tools that they already have, from the program, the structure of the work that they already have, trying to add this specific focus on transversal skills. So we had simulation of interviews, as it was also experienced by us partners during the project, and it was very useful. We conducted this group work to deepen the different dimensions and also the way of identifying and assessing, or better guiding the self-assessment of the transversal skills for each of the transversal competencies that we were about to pilot in our region. So this very practical and in a way peer-to-peer also learning, guided by the Transval-EU framework, was very effective.
Yeah, we worked together with other partner, so we didn't have different pilots or trainings. We did everything together, but of course we are small country, so nowhere very very far away to run. But still, we chose 3 vet schools, vet providers who participated in the project, and we did trainings for them, for their staff. Most of them, of course, there will be validation experts or counselors or some, but there was some teachers as well, for sure, because the schools don't have such a huge staff, only for validation. So that's why we started our trainings from the basics. So we started from what is validation, what is all the steps, what is even difference between skills and competence, what is the transversal skills, what is the difference from general skills, from soft skills, from all the types of skills. We talked about national qualification framework, we talked about ESCO. So then when we had all the theoretical part from the beginning to use correct terminology, what was very important, and to understand, then it was much easier to work already with the transversal competences frameworks. The most convenient thing was to use interview and observation methods for validation. So that's why we again went deeply to the interview method, how to create the questions and everything. And then, of course, we did as well simulations when the groups work, when they try to validate the competence level, to create the questions, and we created some unexpected scenarios for them. So when the people are not talkative, when people are too much talkative, how to work with them, how to have proper number of evidences of those competences. So this was actually 2 days training. And after the piloting, we had one more day of the trainings. It was mostly for reflections, because it was very important for them to share, and for us, of course, to share what was happening in the process. Because the one thing when you are just filling some forms, and another thing when you can reflect and talk with your colleagues and share insights about all the process. That's it.
Maybe I can
Did I lose your
continue
mic?
here because we have some similar points at our
Yeah,
training.
please.
Yeah, exactly. Because so in our Austrian training from EIESP, we invited practitioners from very different validation procedures or guidance projects in Austria from different regions. And so part of them were coming from validation procedures or guiding procedures, which have the focus on the individual's development, personnel, or for employment, and for decisions concerning education and job questions. This was a large group of about 10 of the practitioners working with adults in general, or with migrants, or with people having impairs and rehabilitation processes and so on. And on the other side, we had a few of the practitioners working in validation processes where the certification really is in the focus of the procedure. So different approaches, let's say, in this field of validation. And as we have a very heterogeneous landscape of validation offers in Austria, and also the terminology is not that clear also in Austria, as Inga said, by Lithuania. We also started with the intro, with an input from an Austrian university professor about what validation really means and what's the benefits, what's the potentials of validation concerning making learning outcomes to be seen and to be recognized. So this was our intro, to have really a common understanding of what we are speaking, also about what are transversal skills, what is it, what does this mean. And this gave us a good basic and a good the exchange also was very important between these practitioners. And this gave us a good basic for the second day. We had a 3 days in presence training in Vienna, and the second day then was in focus was the method workshops for methodological, so to really practice how to make this guidance and validation procedures running and going for transversal skills then.
Regarding the education or the professionalization of trainers and guidance practitioners, actually there's no standardized training guidance experts have to make. There are several possibilities on how to work as a validation expert, guidance practitioner, but there is no standardized training. So this is why I think Karin said beforehand, it would be great if there's some kind of common curriculum they have to attend, that there is a common understanding of what validation is, what they have to do, what kind of, just what it is to be, what are the main tasks of being a guidance practitioner. This is the situation. And the Transval-EU training also in Salzburg was really helpful for this, because we were working with several practitioners working in different fields with different target groups from different procedures and initiatives. So we really had a lot of also different understandings on what transversal competence this could be and what validation is exactly, because validation is a really wide field. And we really had to talk about these things as well in our trainings. And this brought us to a common understanding, and we really could focus on this. After an initial day, the first day was more on creating this common understanding before going into the tools and the methods on how to use the competence framework and how to work with the candidates on this.
So you all worked from the same framework, but then adapted it for your own locations and your own specific types of guidance counselors. Can I ask about Poland, Barbara?
Yes, I just wanted to say that Poland is exactly somewhere between Lithuania and Austria, because we were working with guidance counselors that work at schools, at secondary schools. So they were our major target group of the field trials in Poland, the guidance counselors based in secondary schools. So they are counselors, so it was not needed to teach them about the validation and competences, but we did just a very general introduction just to be sure that we're on the same page when we are talking about competences and validation. But it appeared that, for example, still it is very important and very hard to understand the difference between identifying competences and verifying competences. So there is a lot of misunderstanding between those two stages. And in Poland, we were focused on two stages of validation of transversal competences, mainly on identification and then on documenting using a specialized application. So we proposed two tools to our practitioners to use during the field trials. It was the skills audit method. It was quite new for them. We gave them a lot of time during the training to train the art of interviewing a person, a client, especially when we have in mind the transversal competences. And I think that it was quite a successful part of the training because they were very interested in the method, and as far as we know, they are still using this method. And to the candidates, our guidance counselors were working at schools. We have proposed the application My Portfolio. It is an e-portfolio, and I would say that they really enjoyed using the new app for them.
Was it intuitive, both in the training and also in the implementation? Was the idea of what transversal competences are something easy to grasp?
Overall, I must say that in our case, among professionals, there was a good understanding and level of awareness and knowledge about what we mean for transversal competencies. But a point that was discussed and was kind of taken into consideration was the awareness of beneficiaries when it comes to this topic.
Inga, I wanted to ask you, since these were all very new concepts in Lithuania, did you have to spend more time really on defining concepts and getting people familiar with those?
I think the problem is with terminology. If something is new coming, we are calling in Lithuanian language everything like soft skills. So for them, it was not like difference between or general skills. So we had national problems with terminology in general, and transversal skills, even translation of that, it's called very strange in Lithuania. So this was explaining them what is difference between soft skills and transversal skills. So I think in the end it was very funny that one of the participants was saying like how they were explaining to the candidates, to the students, what it is. She was saying that it is invisible bag where you are having everything and you're going from one place to another, but you have that bag with you. So this is your transversal competency. So I really like that explanation.
Julia, you've been waiting patiently, so I'm going to ask you a question now. I think, maybe if you could talk about the design of the evaluation and focus primarily on the training at this point, and some of the challenges perhaps of working with several different field trial countries where they've adjusted the training to fit their own contexts.
So we were really interested in, well, accompanying this project. And so, well, basically what concerns the training, we didn't really evaluate the training as such. It was just the starting point for us to see where field trials were going. And it was the point when we realized that there will be significant differences among the countries. And when we started to balance, the way my colleague Maurice put it, to find a balance between practice and science. Because, of course, for the research point of view, it would have been ideal to have the same modules and then the same focus on competences in all the field trials. But we soon realized that this would be very challenging and would not really fit the needs of all the field trial partners. This basically now means that when we look at the results, we can see some significant differences that are not based on the validation as such, but rather on the way the field trials were done. So a large part is just simply explained through the way field trials were run. But nevertheless, our main points of evaluation, we could still carry out the way we planned. And these were split into a study among the candidates, a study among the practitioners, and then process monitoring and the facilitation of peer learning. So basically, we had, for the study among validation candidates, we had developed questionnaires that are based on social inclusion models that our research partner, the Free University of Brussels, has already long-standing experience with. We adapted these a little bit towards transversal competences, and all the candidates received the same questionnaire with some of the question batteries exchanged. But there was still enough to analyze the data later on. We got a lot of results, more than we had actually expected in the beginning. So that also made up a little bit for these differences in the various countries, because overall we got more than 200 answered questionnaires.
Mm-hmm.
And we could actually see that the whole validation process had a big impact, a big positive impact on the candidates. And irrespective of the type of field trial that they were part of. So that's basically a very good, I think it's a very good result that just shows that validation, no matter in which form, always basically, that's really a conclusion, always has a positive impact on most of the candidates. Of course, not on all of them, but really a very strong impact was visible from analyzing the results. And it was really irrespective of the type of validation, and even because, like we just heard, in each country, different stages of the validation process were focused on. And irrespective of that, whether it was only identifying and documenting the transversal competences, or whether it went all the way towards really certifying them, there was always a positive impact throughout. Possibly because this was also something we gained from the interviews we did with practitioners, that it just, the whole setting is something very empowering. So it increases people's self-confidence, and they trust in what they do, and that helps them to get further, and basically to what we checked, what's the main focus with candidates was really this social inclusion point. So through feeling more empowered, they are more likely to, well, interact, to join events, to go out, and yeah, all of these things that represent social inclusion.
So this is interesting because not only are people identifying their transversal competences, by the fact of identifying them, they're also strengthening them. That's what you're saying. And I see people nodding that this seems to resonate with them. So empowerment was really a big thing, I think, that stands out in the evaluation then.
Yes, regarding the candidates for sure. And then I can continue to talk also about the practitioners, maybe.
Sure, because yeah, and then I'll also ask about the field trial partners after that a little bit.
Yeah, okay. So, well, we also studied the practitioners that took part in the project. In each country, we tried to get a certain number of practitioners to join and to fill in questionnaires before participating in the field trial and after finishing their participation. And we wanted to see whether they, for example, gained knowledge about transversal skills, about the validation process as such. And we could actually see probably a little bit more, well, almost unexpectedly, that because when we looked at the practitioners that took part in the field trials, most of them were very experienced. They had years of experience and they considered themselves very professional. And even though they were all basically at a very high level to start with, they still, well, at least 75% really answered in a way that shows that they increased their, well, their level of competence regarding transversal competences on the one hand, but also on in relation to the validation process and to validating transversal competences in particular. And also they increased their competency towards regarding assessment, how to assess competences in relation especially to transversal competences. So that was also a bit unexpected to see these high numbers, actually. We were quite positively surprised that even the experienced practitioners all reported an increase, or not all of them, but 3/4 reported an increase in their competences.
That reminds me, and Karin had talked about the need to professionalize guidance and validation practitioners. So I think perhaps the requirements and background for these professionals differ in each of your countries. Is that right? So in Lithuania, what are the requirements to be a guidance and or validation practitioner?
So I think there is none for validation experts because officially it is done in the schools, vocational educational schools. So it is normally validated by the teachers. So this means that we don't have very specific persons to be involved, and we don't have such a profession in Lithuania officially. So there is an expert who are working, they could join some trainings, but normally it is a guidance counselors or some other people who has other responsibilities in the vet schools, and they are responsible for that. So for that part as well. So it could be, I don't know, vice director, counselor, or some expert, but normally it is teachers. So for us it was very important.
Right, and so it sounds like this probably varies from school to school as well. And so maybe a longer term aim might be to introduce methods and tools a bit more broadly.
Yes, I think it is, well, we don't have the culture of the validation of something. It is like so normally our validation goes only through formal validation system. So this means it is mostly in the vet schools or universities. So we are trying, so that's why we are pushing the project. It's not the first my project, and I think it is the third project on validation. So I'm really trying to push the agenda to use it more widely, to use in general validation process more in Lithuania, not only in universities with very high costs or in the vet schools where nobody wants to do that because they are losing their students. So this is like a little bit confusing for everyone, and to use it widely. One more thing I wanted to say that we accredited our training program. So this official accredited training program. So this means that in the future we can use it, and when it's accredited, you get certificates for the and everything. So this means that hopefully more people will be joining us, and we will increase the awareness of transversal skills and validation.
Yeah, always there's an example where validation is in itself an incentive. So can I ask about Austria and your experience? Well, what are the requirements to be a guidance and or validation practitioner in Austria? And what was the experience of using this training to develop that further? Julia, I think I read in the evaluation that some of the feedback from practitioners was that the concepts were very abstract and that they really had to work to bring these down to their daily life and to translate that in a way.
Yes, indeed. That was one of the feedback we received in quite a few interviews, that yeah, there is a bit of a difference between like the theory and the wording of how, for example, the framework is set up, and then in the actual work with candidates. A lot of practitioners mentioned that they basically had to do some translation work to translate it into a more into words that are closer to the reality of the candidates, let's say, and not at this abstract education bubble that we are in a way.
Yeah.
But well, they did enjoy the work nevertheless, and they said once they translated it, it became very accessible for their candidates.
Maybe I could turn now to the client point of view, the people who were benefiting from the use of these tools. And maybe Julia, I could ask you to talk a little bit about the evaluation of their point of view and what you were looking for.
So basically what we were looking for were whether this process of validating transversal skills had an impact on candidates' awareness of transversal skills, on their employability, on their social inclusion. So yeah, on their feeling of empowerment, and generally whether it had an impact on their transversal skills and competences as such. Yeah.
Was there enough time in the study to really find out about employability?
No.
Okay. And the social inclusion would have been more immediate because
the social inclusion actually, so like I mentioned before, this was actually the focus of this the questionnaire that we used. It was initially developed to measure social inclusion. So it's a very powerful tool to measure this aspect. And this was also the one where we had the strongest positive results, let's say. So that's something we can actually say, that it did have a positive impact on candidates' social inclusion across countries. Regarding employability, in very many cases, the time frame was too short between the two questionnaires. And yeah, of course, regarding awareness of transversal skills, there were also positive results, because this was, well, one of the main aspects was to talk about transversal skills and to explain what they are and how they can be identified. So that was also a positive outcome.
So can I ask, what is the goal after this project is over for sharing and scaling up, if at all, the tools, or is it meant to disseminate and people can choose from these among other tools? What is the goal in your different countries? Maybe I can ask Chiara because you worked with a public service, so.
Yes, so I think from our experience, the tools that, or the products also of the project that was very useful, as my colleague said already, is the competences framework. It might require further adaptation, further work, but it was extremely useful for the presence of the levels of competency. And that is something I would stress on for further disseminating and enlarging the number of organizations committed to making the validation of transversal skills a reality for all the citizens in Europe. And also in Italy, the context is very fragmented. This is a matter of the regions. That's why I've always made clear that I was referring to Umbria region. So there might be slight changes or differences across the context. And I think it is extremely important to build on what is already there, to embed the tools the many tools that Transval-EU has mapped, and some of which we have tested ourselves, to embed them in the already in place and existing procedures and programs if we want these to be sustainable and to make an impact after the project.
Barbara, can I ask about Poland?
Yeah, I already mentioned about our dream of creating a countrywide program of making the transversal skills visible at schools, but it is not the only one idea. The other way of implementing the transversal results is adding to all the trainings we are conducting at EBA on validation. We want implement to add a module on transversal skills, on transversal competences, and we are doing this during our trainings and webinars, etc. So yes, it is alive in EBA works, and one additional way of implementing the transversal results. In Poland, we have the integrated skills strategy, and one of the one of the most important chapters of that strategy are transversal skills. So we are going to use the transversal competences framework in Poland, but I can't tell you more details because it is going to be developed.
Thank you. Julia, can I ask from an evaluator's point of view, what are the lessons learned that will be important for really anchoring this type of approach in any country?
Yeah, that's a very valid question. We talked about it as well with Chiara actually last week, I think, the lessons learned. So I think altogether, we noticed that the training is really the most important starting point. So in any case, some kind of training would be crucial for any other endeavors in this respect. And then I think a good learning is also, a quite reassuring one, is that it doesn't matter so much on which competences you focus specifically or which type of validation arrangement you choose. Like Inga mentioned before, actually, it's really just the process of really thinking about competences. So any type of validation arrangement actually has a positive effect. So that, yeah, I think that's a very important learning. And yeah, to focus on the training and to motivate practitioners to enhance their portfolios also, and to try and use new methods, new tools. I think that was really, those were the lessons learned. Well, communicate. Communicate with everyone from the start, clarify terminology, clarify timelines, and yeah, kind of have a plan about the whole project in the beginning. Yeah, not to overlook certain aspects that become unclear as you start really getting into the topic. I mean, it will always happen anyway, but as far as possible, it helps to think everything through with the relevant partners in charge, really.
Well, I have one lesson learned regarding the trainings, because we made 2 different trainings in Salzburg. One with a very heterogeneous group of practitioners, and the other one with a homogeneous group working with the same target group. And both trainings were really successful. But you always have to think about, what do you want with the training? Do you want to focus on the exchange of the practitioners, exchanging their different experiences, and so focusing on the peer-to-peer learning? Or do you want to create some kind of common method, a common tool on how to work with your candidates? Then it is better to work in a homogeneous group. So just focus on your aim, on your objective, on the training, can help to make the training even more successful.
Great. That sounds actually kind of like it echoes a bit of the general advice on having a plan, but also being adaptable or flexible. So we can think of those as main lessons learned.
If I can,
Yeah.
I would recommend to involve practitioners from the beginning in the design of the field trial. I think it would then facilitate and make the whole process easier. I would also say, don't be scared. There will be points in which you think that you will not manage. But in fact, then it is possible. And also about timing within projects, it is always an issue. But I think that processes as the field trials that we have implemented, that really wanted to make a difference, to be grounded in the context, etc., deserve time to be effective. So maybe just give you a couple of more months than you expect to need, yeah.
I'm sure evaluators always appreciate time as well, because it's an important element in really seeing what the true impact of any given intervention is. So have I forgotten anything that's really important, or any, vital last words?
So add what was Chiara was saying. So I think it's very important to think about the benefits for the candidate, no, for the participant in general. So this means that if we are just assuming that we will have a public call and I don't know, 200 people will be knocking to our doors, it's not going to happen. I don't know, in other countries, in Lithuania for sure. When you have a benefit and explaining them what they benefit from the participation, from the project, from the time, so it's much easier than to involve people and to communicate with them. So I think it is a very important thing. I don't think that it should be money. We didn't pay money to anyone, but it was like accredited program, peer learning, invitation of the experts, some new knowledge. When you are explaining them where you can use your learning outcomes in the national system. So this is like to talk with them what they will benefit from that.
So selling the benefits of the program, very important.